You're listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.
Welcome to the Mammal Watching podcast with me, John Hall in New York.
And me, Charles Foley in Minneapolis. Well, John, I suspect that there are thousands of people who have signed on for today's podcast in order to hear the big reveal.
I'm worried about Spotify's bandwidth. I think the whole thing is going to collapse. There's been so much interest. Yes, Charles, it's time for that mystery mammal. But before we give away the answer, let's hear it one more time. Yeah, we've had a few answers submitted. Alex Mayer, Jonas Livet, Toma Ben Yehuda.
Edith Coppinall got it.
Coppinall, yeah. And somewhat surprisingly, they all got the right answer, didn't they?
They did, yeah, which is a little frustrating, to be honest. We thought it was really difficult.
I thought it was impossible. Maybe the clues we gave were a bit too much. I think we did let people narrow it down. But at the same time, Alex Mayer had actually heard a very similar species himself a few months earlier, so he kind of knew it. So I definitely underestimated people. So I'm very sorry to those I underestimated, which is everyone.
Right, indeed. And we should say that the mystery mammal was indeed a Sumatran rhino. And the recording was sent in to us by Chris Scharf. And he didn't actually say where he got it from, but he said that it was a male and a female that were moving together, which is great news in and of itself with such a rare species. And it was the sound of one animal calling the other. So congratulations to those who got it.
And for those who don't remember, Chris Scharf was actually on the podcast a year or so back. He was the guy who has been trying to get pictures of Sumatran rhino and ended up in a hammock suspended above a tiger for 4 days in Sumatra. With not a lot of help, so just stuck there. So it was an incredible story. So perhaps this means he's gone back and seen a Sumatran rhino, or at least recorded one. I don't know. We'll have to find out. We'll put it in the notes.
That's right. And I still remember Chris saying that he has seen a Sumatran rhino, but he doesn't count it because he hasn't photographed it. Now there is dedication to the cause.
Exactly. Wow. Okay, Charles, and we were just talking, you have a great story from the Netherlands about
Yes,
wolves.
Indeed. Yes. So I was reading that a court in Utrecht in the Netherlands has ruled that wolves that pose a danger to the public may be shot with, wait for it, a paintball gun. Right? So wolves have recently moved into the Netherlands, and apparently in one of the national parks, and it's called De Hoge Veluwe National Park, and I probably absolutely massacred that name and will no doubt be hearing from my Dutch friends in short order. However, in that national park, they have several wolves, and there is a particular female wolf that is very relaxed around people and doesn't run off if people approach her and or shout at her, etc. And the authorities are worried that she and other wolves might at some point attack someone. So they took this to court, and the court said that the authorities could not use pepper spray on aggressive wolves in case it harmed them, but they could shoot them with paintball guns. So if you happen to be like wandering around Holland and you see a wolf with red, green, and blue spots all over its fur, you know what's going on.
I love this story. It seems only fitting that the land of Rembrandt, Vermeer, and Van Gogh would do it this way with paint.
That's right.
Wow.
It does seem like a very typical Dutch solution to me.
A very Dutch solution, just very pragmatic. And anyway, good luck for the wolves there, and they have been warned. Charles and I are extremely happy to be joined today on the last episode of season 2 of the podcast by Sebastian Kennerknecht, I did it, who's a wildlife and conservation photographer with over 14 years of experience covering wildlife, environmental conservation issues internationally, particularly focused on cats. I actually bumped into Sebastian in Deramakot 18 months ago, summer of 2022, with Ian Thompson and his partner Tracy and Charles Hood. Phil Telfer and others, and met Sebastian then, thought he'd be a great guy to have on the podcast because of all the work he's doing. He's fascinating to talk to about the art of camera trapping, something he excels at. Some of the adventures he's had in many of the places I've been, tracking down some of the world's rarest cats and trying to photograph things that have hardly ever been photographed. And also now running tours, photography tours for cats, but all of this in the name of conservation. So Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us from California.
Thanks for having me, John, and thanks. You did a good job on my last name. I butcher it more than you do, so I know it's a tough one to get through.
Yeah. Welcome, Sebastian. Very good to meet you.
Yeah, thanks, Charles.
So why don't we start off by you telling us how you came to be interested in wildlife?
Yeah, funny story, because I was born in Munich in Germany, which is not super wildlife rich unless you're super excited about squirrels and hedgehogs, which then again I am. But I most of my mammal watching I did at the Munich Zoo, to be honest, which as a kid was a fantastic place to see animals from all around the world. And the other thing my dad did, which was, I love him for it, he put the small pond into our tiny backyard. It was tiny. I mean, in the winter we'd skate across it, and with one stride we'd be across the whole thing. But I just loved watching dragonfly nymphs emerge and, metamorphose into adults, or tadpoles turn into frogs in that tiny little pond. And that was really, really fascinating to watch this mini ecosystem in our backyard.
Fantastic. And yet another person inspired by a zoo. It is extraordinary the power that zoos have to inspire people. Yeah, I love it.
I'm really tempted to actually put together a compilation of all of the people who have actually mentioned zoos as their inspiration when they were young. So it'll be a long list.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I mean, I have somewhat conflicting views about zoos now, but I know that as a kid I wouldn't be on this podcast today if it wasn't for that Munich Zoo. So I definitely think they have a place.
Yeah. They're easy to criticize, but there's a lot of good they do that people often overlook. So you're interested in wildlife. Where did the interest in photography come from?
Photography, another thing I can say I can be thankful for my dad for, because he used to be that typical dad on family trips. He'd bring the old camera, shoot the family portraits and some of the surrounding stuff. And it's this one particular trip that started me off in photography, where we did this family trip to Tahiti. It was a big deal for us. And on one of the days we were there, my dad took me out on this outrigger canoe. So we're paddling along, and this pod of dolphins surrounds the boat. And dolphins were my absolute favorite animal as a kid. And I was just over myself. My dad hands me his camera and says, "Take photos." And I'm old enough for this to be the film days. I had no idea what I was doing. I took the camera, I took photos, but I knew they weren't going to be turning out. So as soon as we got back to land, I was like, "Dad, just teach me everything you know about photography." And that was kind of the beginning of it.
Wow.
Yeah. So how did your career progress from there on?
Yeah, I thought I was going to become a biologist, to be honest. That's what I wanted to do. I went to UC Santa Cruz in California here in the United States, studying behavioral ecology. I wanted to understand why animals do what they do. And I I thought I was going to study wildlife, but then photography was always kind of a hobby in the back of my mind. I had the opportunity to intern for a National Geographic photographer who I learned was in town. I went to his studio. I was like, "Can I intern for you? Free labor is hard to pass up." So he took me right on. And during that time, I realized how powerful photography is. It doesn't matter what language you speak, an image is translatable to everybody in the world. If you see a starving polar bear or a lion with a snare on it, you're going to have an emotional reaction to it, no matter where you are from in the world. And to me, that was so powerful, especially as I was understanding how threatened so many of our species are, how threatened the planet is. the conservation potential of photography to me was extremely engaging. I wanted to do it. So during that time, I decided this is what I want to try to do. And so my first project out of college was to photograph the threatened and endangered species of the central coast of California. The only mammal on that list was sea otters, which are adorable and very cute. But that project took me 4 years to do. I didn't know what I was doing, but at the end of it, I gained a lot of skills. I knew how to work with conservation organizations. So I started approaching specifically wildcat organizations because I loved wildcats. And I learned how to camera trap at this time already. So I approached them and I said, hey, I would love to work for you. I'd love to show the work you guys are doing. I'd love to photograph the cats that you guys are working on. And now 15 years later, I'm traveling 8 to 10 months of the year, mostly working for conservation organizations, photographing all of their work and photographing the cats that they work on.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing job.
Yeah.
Can I ask who the National Geographic photographer was that you interned with?
Yeah, it's Frans Lanting. He's originally from the Netherlands and now he lives in Santa Cruz. And because same town, it worked out perfectly for me. And I even got to go on 2 assignments with him, one of which was in Senegal on chimpanzees. That was incredible. And the other one was to Midway Atoll for an albatross story.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure he's not a bad mentor to have, Frans Lanting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Sebastian, obviously, you're extremely interested in the world's wild cats, and indeed, like many mammal watchers. So, how did this interest develop, and what do you think it is about cats that seem to trigger people's imaginations?
Yeah. Cats are really, really, really intriguing. I don't know what it is for other people. For me personally, I think what fascinates me so much about cats is that there are a lot of things I'd like to be. That makes sense. So cats are very stealthy. You can hear me walking through a forest from a half mile away. I'm not stealthy. I'd like to be stealthy, but I'm not. They're extremely powerful. They're super independent. Those are, I don't know, I think those are qualities that I personally would love to be better at, but and maybe that's why I love cats so much. There's so much intrigue around them. You know, so many of the cats species are super elusive. Yes, tigers and lions and jaguars and leopards are relatively easy to see, but there's lots and lots and lots of small cats, as most of your listeners obviously know about, that just are not that easy to find. And to me, that's super intriguing as well.
Mm. Yeah, and to be fair, even things like tigers and snow leopards and jaguars, 40, 50 years ago were really hard to see as well. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah, indeed. And so for me personally, the way it started with cats was that while I was going to school in Santa Cruz, and I know you guys have a global audience. I've been a big fan of your podcast. I've been listening to it since the first episode, but the Santa Cruz, where I went to school, is in nature, basically. It is surrounded by nature. There's meadows and redwood forests all around this campus. And I just got obsessed about wanting to photograph a bobcat, which I knew were on campus, but I'd never seen one. So at first I went to the library and I was like, let me read everything I could on their ecology. What habitats do they like? What prey do they eat? All this kind of different stuff. And so once I'd done that, I would just go out every morning, and any chance I had to look for these cats. And it took me about a month to find my first bobcat, and I was so thrilled. And a couple of weeks later, and this is really where the obsession with cats for me began, was that I found a mom female bobcat that had an almost independent cub. And I don't know why, but she trusted me. And which was weird because sometimes I would see other people come by and she'd hunker down, but for some reason she would teach her cub how to hunt in front of me. She would nap in front of me, and just getting to see all of that behavior made it really, really fascinating for me to learn more about this group of mammals, really.
Wow.
which also led me, because this is California, right? So the only other cat species we have in California is mountain lions. So I had the bobcat, and I had this incredible experience, and then the obsession started. And I think both of you know this well about moving on to the next species, but it switched to mountain lion. And I was like, how do I photograph mountain lions? And in California, really, that only is possible with camera traps, because you just don't see them here.
Yeah.
You can see them in other parts of the world, but not here.
Yeah. So that takes us on to the next question we wanted to ask about camera trapping. It always used to be those tinny little cameras tied to a tree and you get some blurry image, but it seems to me very, very quickly it's turned into an art form with some absolutely stunning pictures now from around the world. But there's also a lot of science that goes into it, I know. Can you talk about how you approach setting a camera trap? What do you need to think about both to capture an image and capture it well?
Yeah, there's a few different things, and you're right, totally. It's blown up. When I first started, there were 10 people doing it, and they were all had National Geographic photographer in their title, and I was puttering around by myself. But what I find fascinating about camera trapping is that it requires a good ecological knowledge. You need to understand what habitats do animals like, what are their patterns within that habitat. Does a mountain lion always use the same game trail? And even like with cats, they tend to walk in circles, right? They don't tend to walk back and forth. So if I'm putting up a camera trap and I don't want to get only butt shots, which way do I have to face the camera to get the mountain lion's face? So that's one thing. The second thing, obviously, is technically, like you said, you're not just strapping a camera to the tree. You now have a SLR camera inside a waterproof housing. You generally have multiple flashes that go with that setup. And you have to figure out, okay, what's my exposure going to be? Because normally when you're taking normal photographs, you are obviously able to change buttons as the light is changing. With a camera trap, that's an impossibility. Once you've set it, it stays there and you leave, and nothing changes until you come back. So you have to decide, okay, what's my exposure and what is my flash power? And you're really basing that generally on what time you think the animal will come through. So this is, again, where the natural history aspect of it comes through. If I'm photographing mountain lions in California, they're very nocturnal in this area. They're not very diurnal. So I'm going to be setting for nighttime exposures compared to bobcats, which are much more diurnal here. So very different settings based off of the species I'm photographing. And then the third thing that I think about is what kind of impact am I having with the camera traps on the cats? So luckily cats are inquisitive. I've had African golden cat cheek rub my camera trap. I've had pumas cheek rub my camera trap. They're just curious. But if I'm setting up on a carcass, for example, if I found a mountain lion kill and I want to set up my camera trap on it, then instead of doing burst mode where there's 5-6 pictures going off right after each other and the flashes are going off continuously, I'm just going to set the camera to take one single image every 5 to 10 minutes. And I'll put a video camera trap next to it just to see the reaction of the cats. And what I've noticed is that when I take those precautions, then the cat doesn't care at all. But the last thing I would want, obviously, is to push the cat off of the kill or affect the behavior of the cat in any way. So those are the things I think about when I'm setting up a camera trap, which make it a fun challenge. I would say camera trapping is 99% frustration and 1% pure exuberance, but it's worth it for that 1%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of mammal watching generally, actually.
So I'm curious, because I know that many researchers who are studying cats, they will use scents and things like a CD that's hanging up to cat's eyes, etc. Do you use things like that, like lures, or you don't?
Yeah, I don't. I think there's we always have to think about what our objectives are, what our actions are doing. I think for research that can be justified because they're figuring something out that in the end will probably have a pretty distinct conservation action, or it's really going to further our knowledge of that species. And for that, I can see the justification of using a bait. But for photography, I am vehemently against baiting, especially because you have the potential, especially with carnivores, right? Like, and scents, especially, you could be bringing in two carnivores into the same site at the same time. And I've seen it with wolves and coyotes in Yellowstone where the coyote, it was a natural thing. It was a bison kill, but the coyote didn't survive that encounter. So I would never, ever want to be responsible for pulling in two carnivores into the same space by using a scent or an audio lure or anything like that that brings in carnivores. So for me, it's relying on the natural history knowledge, knowing that the cat will use that trail probably to try to get those images. And maybe that means there's fewer images, but I'm not willing to take the chance of hurting an animal in some way.
Absolutely. So you have photographed 31 of the world's cat species, is that correct?
Yeah, 31. Don't worry.
31. All right.
Yeah, don't worry, guys. John, especially you. I know your cat list is pretty high. I have not seen 31. I've photographed 31, but I've only seen, I think it's around
6?
I think it's around 23, I think. But I'm not anywhere near you, John, so no reason to break out in a cold sweat right now.
Breathe.
Okay. Moving right along. So of those 31, which were the most difficult to photograph?
Yeah, I mean, you know this as the mammal watchers you are, but there's some very, very difficult species. Andean cat was super hard. That took 3 months to get a halfway decent shot of one. I had African golden cat almost killed me twice trying to get that cat. And then Borneo bay cat. I mean, you both know how hard that cat is. That was probably the toughest one out of all of them.
So we did see a Bornean bay cat probably the same day I met you, actually, the same few days. One just ran across the road randomly, which was a big shock to everyone. But we never expected even to get a glimpse, let alone to take a picture. How did you photograph that? What did you do to get that one?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that moment, and we were in different parts of the reserve at that point. You messaged me and you said you had gotten a big cat. And I was so happy for you. That is I mean, and Mike, your guide, I think he's seen it twice or
Exactly.
3 times, maybe.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
So that, I think, it's got to be the holy grail of all cats. That's the hardest one, is my opinion. But well, yeah, one thing I want to make clear. So for all this conservation work I'm doing and to get these photographs, it's never really in isolation. Like, I am generally not just there by myself, or at the very least, I've had some help from biologists who are studying this species and who've mostly dedicated their entire lives to studying the cat. So for the Borneo bay cat, I was working with Andy Hearn, who is a wild crew biologist. Wild crew has this whole cat department, which is amazing. And so I went to Borneo twice. This was back in 2013, and we set up 4 or 5 SLR camera traps to try to get this cat. The first time it was so frustrating because Andy had a video camera trap behind my SLR camera trap. And there's a video of this bay cat just walking right behind my SLR camera trap, right in front of his video camera trap, looking at the back of my camera trap, being like, "Yeah, not today."
Oh,
Yeah, that one hurt. But I came back later in the year, and then we were finally able to get one high resolution photo of this cat, which I think you would know best, or your listeners would know best, but I think it's still the only high resolution photo of the cat in the wild. There's some high res photos of a cat that was like briefly in captivity, but I think it might still be that one. And it wouldn't exist without Andy. He was obviously instrumental in making that happen.
Wow, isn't that amazing? There's only that one picture. That must feel pretty great to have taken that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely one I'm quite proud of. I mean, it's a hard cat. I know I read the trip reports, and I know people. I think people have gone to Tawau as well after Andy was kind of publishing his work, that to go and try to find it, but it's a hard cat. I remember when I was doing the research for going and trying to get the image, Andy had published a paper on the 5 species of cats on the island. And for the Borneo Bay cat, if I remember this correctly, it was like one photo every 1,340 trap nights or something like that. And
Wow. Every
and
3 years.
the conservation organization I was working for at the time was Panthera. They were like, get it done in 4 weeks. When Andy was averaging one photo every 3 years.
You just need 500 cameras and then you'll be fine.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I'm curious, for you, what gives you the biggest thrill? Is it to see the animal directly with your eyes, or is it to capture a great photo of it on camera?
To be honest, I mean, I love doing both, but my favorite part about it is sharing and educating or making people aware, building empathy around these cats, especially the small cats. We all know, like, I play this fun little game with people where I say, how many cat species can you list? And unless you're with a mammal watcher, you kind of end at 8 or 9 or 10, right? But I feel like my mission in life is to get that number to like 15 or 16, get people into the small cats, get people to be interested in serval and caracal and manul and marbled cat and pampas cat, these super cool cats that we have in the world that people just don't know about. So getting to share those is what gets me really excited. And I think good photographs can do that, right?
Yeah, for sure. They're absolutely
Yeah.
vital. That's a noble ambition. I saw on your CV that you'd been to the Tian Shan Mountains in Kyrgyzstan, which is a hell of a place. Looking for snow leopards. I was there. I didn't see one. We saw tracks. We had all sorts of other adventures and scrapes on the way. Can you tell us a bit about that work?
Yeah. Did you also go on a 4-hour horse ride to your base camp?
No, I did go on a horse, but the horse was very happy to see the back of me in the snow and the ice.
Yeah, I'm just not an experienced rider the whole time up to base camp, which was a 4-hour horse ride from the closest road. I was like, please, horse, please want to be as alive as much as I do, because I don't know, I cannot control you. You have all the power. But yeah, it was a fascinating trip. Like you said, Central Asia, an area that's not super visited. And the project there was super cool. The PI, the principal investigator, the biologist, was Shannon Kachel, and he was looking at this. His hypothesis was that wolves and snow leopards had a mutualistic relationship. And he hypothesized that wolves were driving argali, which are species that tends to hang out on the valley floor of mountains, up onto the slopes where the snow leopards like to hang out, and that snow leopards were pushing ibex onto kind of the plains or the valleys of those mountains, of the Tian Shan Mountains. And he kept, I think he's written his paper now, and in fact, he found that relationship to be true, that he kept seeing wolf kills of ibex and argali kills that were made by snow leopards.
Wow.
In areas that were, characteristic for the predator, but not characteristic for the prey.
Interesting.
Yeah, which was super cool. The hard part, of course, was, like you said, it's a vast landscape, right, John? Like you were there. Those mountains are huge. The area just looks gigantic. And when they said, okay, photograph these snow leopards, that meant using camera traps again. But the hard part with camera traps is the animal has to pass in front of your camera by like just a few feet, a couple of meters at max. So within this gigantic landscape of 13,000 foot high mountains, you're like, okay, I'm going to select these 5 spots where the camera's not going to move for the next 6 weeks to have a snow leopard come by here. And that was a real challenge. Again, had a lot of help from Shannon. We ended up finding a few ridge lines that the snow leopards like. We found a scent marking spot. All cats like to scent mark in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through urine or scat or scraping. And we found one nice boulder. What's really cool about it was actually that the boulder generation of snow leopard had used this same boulder for scent marking. And they always kind of cheek rub like your domestic cat does. They cheek rub against it, claiming it as their territory. And because so many generations had done it, the rock was smooth from
Wow.
just probably thousands of generations of snow leopards using the same spot. It was incredible.
Oh,
And
extraordinary.
we ended up getting 5 photographs of the cats, so everybody was really excited.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, needle in a haystack doesn't come close to
Yeah.
the chances of that. That's fantastic. Well, well done.
There was this I think snow leopards take the cake for camouflage. So sorry, this is a little side note, but the project was to fit these snow leopards with satellite collars. So Shannon had the task of having these cats step within a very, foot wide diameter spot. So they would step in there, and then there was this what's called a foothold trap, and it goes around the foot, and then alarm signals go off, and the biologists and myself, we have to rush to the scene, and the veterinarian comes and sedates the animal and then puts a satellite collar on them. And that whole process takes about an hour. But one time the alarm goes off for the trap, so we know there's probably a cat in there. We rush out, and this was like at 3-4 in the morning. During the night, we get there as quickly as we can, but by the time we get there, it's starting to be light, and the veterinarian was a little older, hadn't caught up to us yet. So Shannon, the biologist, said, "Hey, Sebastian, come with me and check if it's a cat. Sometimes it's a false trigger, sometimes there's a prey animal in there." But so we go up to the trap, and we're now 10 feet, 3 meters from this thing. And we know exactly where to look because that's, it's a tiny trap with the foothold snare, and we don't see anything. Oh, and we're like, oh, it's a false trigger. So we're about to reset it. We take another step towards it, and the snow leopard jumps backwards.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
It was there the entire time. We knew exactly where to look, and we couldn't see this thing. It was in front of us. It was right there. Their camouflage is absolutely ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
I still remember, John, when we went up to Ladakh, to Hemis National Park, and we got up onto it was an area of agriculture that they said, okay, this is going to be our viewing spot. And we looked out, and these mountains looked so vast. I thought, how on earth are we actually going to even see a snow leopard over here? So it must be incredibly daunting to think that you have a couple of feet to play with to actually put your camera trap in the right location. So hats off for you for getting the shots.
Lots of help, lots of luck, and false confidence, I would say.
That does help always.
Yes, we're all blessed with that. Yes. So, Sebastian, obviously you have had some fairly amazing cat encounters. What have been some of your other favorite encounters with these animals?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm such a sucker for behavior that the pumas in Chile, I don't know if either of you have been down there. I think both of you have seen pumas, but seeing the behavior in southern Chile of these cats is incredible. And I keep going back to the same spot right near Torres del Paine National Park. Yeah, so getting to see these cats grow up. I've seen kittens that were 6 months old, and now I've gotten to see them be mothers themselves. But there's this incredible social dynamic to these cats. We always think of pumas as being solitary, lone cats, like we think about all cats, but that's proving to be very much not the case in southern Chile, where I've seen a male and a female adult puma hang out. They were not in any kind of mating. They weren't exhibiting any kind of mating behavior. And it turned out that they were brother and sister, but they're from different litter. They just hung out. They were playing with each other. I've seen it multiple times now where up to 7 adult cats, including unrelated females, are feeding on the same kill. And one of the most fascinating things behaviorally that I saw down there was that there's this cat called Pitaka. She's a female puma. She would kill a guanaco, which is an incredible feat in its own right, because you guys both know guanacos are gigantic. I don't know how a puma looks at that thing and says, yeah, this is a good idea. But they do it continuously. So she took down this guanaco, and then she shared that kill with 6 other females. But it was interesting that every time she came to approach, you know, she would feed and then take a break and then feed. Every time she came back to the carcass to feed, all the other pumas would be submissive to her. And then 2 weeks later, I saw another kill that she had not made. Somebody else made it. She would in turn be submissive to the puma that made the kill. It was like, I made the kill, this is mine. Everybody else, you can feed on it, but I get my turn on it first, which is super interesting.
Yeah. Puma dining etiquette. How fascinating. Yes. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I did go to the only, no, not the only pumas. What's that again? I was in Torres del Paine, and we saw a group of 7 pumas together. At the time, it was the most my guide Jose, you probably know, had ever seen. And I think they were multiple generations of the same family, I think he thought. But yeah, it was like a stampede. They were just running everywhere when we surprised them. Extraordinary.
I know. I really can't wait for the moment that those pumas start hunting like a pride of lions from Africa.
Yeah. Have you ever seen them take down a guanaco? Because I've seen some of the film of that recently. It's absolutely brutal. Those things just clinging onto a bucking guanaco. It's amazing.
Yeah. I've seen it. I've seen 3 hunts, 2 of which were of babies, 1 of which was an adult, and it was incredible. I mean, we were following this female, you know, we were just paralleling her, and then we see her come upon this guanaco. How do you say it properly, actually? Because I've always called it guanaco. You just called it guanaco.
Yeah.
Oh, don't ask me. I have no idea.
Guanaco. You said it right. Yeah.
Okay. I'll listen to Charles.
Yeah, he speaks Spanish.
Okay, guanaco. So, you know, we're following this female. Her name's Ginger, and we're paralleling her, and everything's great. It's incredible to be walking in parallel with a wild predator like that. And then as we were rising on this hill, we see this guanaco grazing, and Ginger hasn't seen her yet, but she continues walking, and all of a sudden I think she scents her before she smells her before she even sees her, and she goes into full predator mode. And within 40 seconds, she was 2 meters away from this guanaco, who had no idea she was there. Then she takes 2 leaps, or really, I think it was 1 big bound, and up she was in the air on top of this guanaco, which is like a llama type size animal. And she kind of overshot it. She landed on it, was kind of piggyback style riding it, and then she rolled off of it on the other side as the guanaco was bucking her off. She tried to catch up to it one more time, but she never did.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So what things are on your bucket list? I imagine there's some cats on there for sure. What would be the top few things you'd love to see that you haven't seen yet or photograph?
Yeah, I will admit I'm pretty cat centric.
We hadn't noticed.
Sandcat is very high, and I know people are seeing that. Mainland clouded leopard is very high on the list. I'm talking to a few people in Nepal and Bhutan, but I know really still don't have a reliable spot for that. And guinia cod. I think you just went down there, right, John?
I did, and it sounds like this narrow, reliable spot. I didn't see them, but they're coming very regularly to the lodge. So
yeah, nice. Yeah, great. Yeah,
an opportunity.
Yeah, I saw your trip report. Yeah, I'm gonna try to go down there this year to see cod. That'd be fantastic. How about you guys? Is Okapi still on the top of your list?
Yeah, Okapi and bush dog for me.
Yeah, definitely a copy. It's Although I'd rather not get killed trying to see it, but we'll see.
Maybe that's the one you'd like save for the end, like when you're
Exactly. Right.
90
Yep.
years old, you're just like, okay, this is happening now. It doesn't
Exactly.
matter what happens.
The
Diagnosed with
sacrificial
something
species.
terminal. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So Sebastian, you're now running photo tours that focus on cat photography. Do you see a lot of interest growing in these really specific mammal-focused tours?
Yeah, I definitely would say so. I mean, I think, like, Charles, we've always had tourism in Africa. We've always had mammal watching on safari, basically in Africa. But now I think that's just expanding, right? We now have areas where you can see jaguars reliably, where you can see pumas reliably, where you can see tigers and snow leopards reliably. And that's just grown this interest. I think in a way, and again, this kind of comes back to what I love about cats, what I love about small cats, what I feel like my job in life is to just start exposing people to these other cats. If you love a big cat, you're gonna love a small cat. What I've noticed is, for example, I found this place in Eastern Mongolia where to reliably see manul. It's with a researcher who works out there as well. And ever since I started sharing manul photos, now I've run 3 back-to-back-to-back tours where we're doing is looking for manul. And I think it comes down to people just being aware that these animals exist. Like Mammalwatching obviously does a good job of that. And it's just a matter of getting the general public more aware that these cats are in existence.
So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the potential for ecotourism for conservation. Sorry, let me say that again. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the potential of ecotourism as a conservation tool.
I think it's one of the most incredible tools we have as an individual for conservation. If you look at the pumas in Chile that we talked about earlier, so those specific pumas, you went to the national park, right, John? Most people now go to a ranch adjoining the national park. So there's this ranch, 6,000 acres. It used to be a sheep farming ranch. And in a bad winter storm in the late 90s, it killed off most of their sheep. So they decided, let's try puma ecotourism. Before that point, they were killing pumas because they were trying to protect their livestock. So as they started bringing people onto their land, they started charging people to come onto the land to show them pumas. It made sense to keep pumas alive, to not shoot pumas. And at this point, 20 years later, 25 years later, they're making way more money with puma ecotourism than they ever did with livestock farming. They don't do any livestock farming anymore. They just bring people onto their land to show them pumas. The advantage of that area over where you went, John, in Torres, is that you can go wherever you want. In Torres del Paine National Park, you have to stay on the trail, which makes sense, right? But this literally translates to pumas being alive. Instead of being shot to protect their livestock, they are now making sure those pumas are staying alive. And it's such an economic incentive that neighboring farms are seeing, hey, we can make a lot of money with puma ecotourism. And there's 2 farms adjoining this farm now that have set aside a significant acreage to puma ecotourism, which again means cats staying alive, which is extremely significant. Of course, there are risks with ecotourism. The biggest thing is once profit is prioritized over the welfare of the animal, that's when you start getting into trouble, right? Because, I mean, Charles, you've spent so much time in Eastern Africa, right? You've seen 100 cars on a cheetah sighting with a mom and cubs, right? That could have a significant impact on that cat and its offspring. And so, like, one of the things that Cat Expeditions, that's the company through which I run these tours, that's my wife's and my company, we pride ourselves on having small groups. So no more than 6 people. And that way the encounter with the animal is super intimate and the impact we're having on the cat is minimal. And so just trying to be aware of multiple factors. One, hiring local guides, which I know you guys have talked about on the podcast always. It infuses money into the local economy. Staying at eco-conscious places. We always donate a part of our proceeds to a conservation organization working in that same area where we are, or doing research on the cats in that area. And so it's about being very conscious. To me, it's about being very conscious about your actions. We all love wildlife. That's why we go to see it. So let's not step over the boundary of having the check mark next to the species be more important than the welfare of the animal.
Yeah, no, that's very well put. And it's really interesting for me to hear more about this puma story in Torres. Charles and I are increasingly sort of interested in these case studies of where this stuff is having a real impact, but the evidence is quite dispersed, and I think we need to pull it together and let people know about this, because there are some real success stories, particularly on the cats.
Yeah,
exactly.
I totally agree. And I know I've tried to make the mammal watching gathering. I forgot what you guys call it, but it tends to be right when I run my Iberian Lynx tour, so I've never been able to make it happen. But there's so many potential places for ecotourism to work for conservation. It's just a matter of setting up the right infrastructure and involving the local people in the right way.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
So what's next? I mean, you're running trips for bobcats and pumas and Pallas's cat Manul, and probably others. What is the next one you want to add to your menu?
Yeah, I mean, more small cats. So I'm running an exploratory trip this year for jaguarundi and ocelot. Jaguarundi is one of those slippery ones.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, have you seen it?
Yeah, but like running across the trail in Brazil, I've never got a picture, never seen one for more than a second or two. Yeah.
Had a great view of one in Bolivia, a couple of months ago. Yeah,
you did?
really good. Yeah.
Good? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's where I'm gonna go. Bolivia.
Yeah.
So a great view is more encouraging than a run across the road. I mean, that's the other thing, right? Like, there's a little bit of a difference between seeing the cat and photographing the cat. I have a lot of people come on my trips who aren't photographers at all, who just want to see the cat, but it's nice when you have a little bit longer of a sighting. So, Charles, you're giving me hope.
Mind you, that was after like days and days of us staring down rows, just like willing a jaguarundi to come out onto one. But anyway, eventually it did, and actually in the area around Santa Cruz, they do seem to see them fairly frequently. So yeah,
fantastic.
good luck with that. Yeah, and the ocelot, we had amazing ocelot sightings over there. Found an ocelot sleeping at about 4 a.m, and it could not have cared less about us. And we watched it for about 20 minutes. It was wonderful.
Oh, that's incredible.
Oh, wow.
Well, now you got me excited.
So obviously you've had tremendous success with taking photos of cats and seeing cats, etc. But I'm sure that, as with all mammal watchers, you've probably had a few misadventures along the way. Are there any stories that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, sure. I've had lots and lots and lots of misfortunes, but definitely outweighed deeply by the mammal sightings. And John, on the trip that I met you on, I ended up getting bit by a centipede, and my arm swelled up to ballooned up like crazy, and I had an emergency hospital visit at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, no.
But I think the craziest story, I think I hinted about it earlier. I said that I've almost gotten killed by the African cat twice. I was in Uganda, and I was in Kibale National Park, for African golden cat. And I think that's actually where you guys had a podcast person on
Harriet.
Harriet, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Who's seeing them now, which is amazing. When I was there, that wasn't the case yet. Otherwise, I would have just asked Harriet to help me out. But this is a little ways back. And so I was there working again with a biologist. His name was David Mills, and I was setting up a camera traps, but he was, helping me walk through the forest and everything. And for the people who don't know, Kibale is a dense lowland tropical forest, and there's forest elephants in there. They're beautiful animals, but they're poached in the area, or at least at that time they were heavily poached. And Charles, you know this super well. Poached elephants equals angry elephants, right? And so
Right.
we would walk through this forest and we would hear the elephants, and when they would smell people, they would charge. So David and I were setting up one of my camera traps for African golden cat, and everything's going well. It takes about an hour to set up one of these cameras, and all of a sudden we hear this loud trumpet of an elephant, like that alarm call. We can't see it yet, but we know it's close because of the volume of this call. It traveled through your body. And then I don't know if you guys remember the scene from Jurassic Park where T-Rex is running through the forest and all the trees are just flopping down. But that's exactly what happened. What it was. This elephant comes out of the thickets. It's just like trampling these trees down and coming full steam at David and I. And without saying anything to each other, we just start booking it the other way. The camera trap was already so set up that I actually have a photo of the bottom of David's legs in full sprint because he triggered the camera trap. But this elephant is charging and it is gaining, because for David and I, we're getting caught by every little branch and every little vine in this thick forest, while this elephant is just trampling everything in its path. And it keeps gaining, it keeps gaining, it keeps gaining. And then it is within just a few feet, 2-3 feet behind us, where David and I just, without saying anything, we just split into two different directions. I went left and he went right. And that was enough of a moment for the elephant to, I don't know, lose interest or be confused. I don't know what it was thinking, but it stopped instead of following us. It ended up returning to my camera trap. It destroyed one of the flashes that had probably our scent all over it. But I'm really glad to have lost a flash and not my life. So that was quite a thrilling experience. And the hard part about it too was I ended up working in that forest for another 3 weeks. And you constantly hearing this rumbling, which is I love that sound, but at that time it felt very much like a little bit of PTSD.
Yeah.
So that was a fun experience. And I'm going back there next year, so we'll see how that goes.
Holy moly, oh, you're brave.
Yep. Yes, I've had 3 colleagues crushed by forest elephants. So they are no joke, those animals.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Well, actually, 2 of them survived, but yeah.
Oh, really? Amazing.
Yeah.
And I know they carry, like there's chimp tourism in Kibale, right? And there's armed guards that come with you. We just didn't have any armed guards, and maybe we should have, but those situations sometimes are just going to happen too, and you hope you're lucky, and thankfully I was.
Yeah. Wow.
Sobering tale. Sebastian, that was a lovely, fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for sparing the time. It's great to hear about your adventures, your work, your passion for conservation and putting the animal first. I think it's really refreshing and important to hear. And good luck with everything you're doing and for getting the next 9 cats photographed and seeing a whole bunch more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'd love to have you guys on one of my trips. Come see some cats with me.
Thank you.
We're just waiting for you to find a reliable site for the Borneo Bay cat, and we'll be right there, Sebastian.
Well, that's boring. That's easy. I've seen that
one. Yeah, you better go with John.
If you'd like to listen to the full episode, then visit mammalwatching.com/podcast.